Greetings once more, viewers, and welcome back to the ever-developing CelesSteel project. As mentioned in the last video, I'm going to be going into a little more detail on the cast of characters and talking about their respective backgrounds. This time, I'm going to be talking about the champions of Libra, Capricorn and Scorpio, represented by MIERA, Kenyokai and Zakhadar. Before I begin introducing the characters, however, I'll start by going through the background story behind CelesSteel in order to better explain how the heroes factor into these events. For the past century, Gaia-Mor had been a peaceful world. The many struggles and conflicts of the past had long since disappeared into the mists of time and become legend. This was until, in the ancient kingdom of Rushar, unrest began to stir. In recent years, the country's economy had fallen into a steady decline, and the northern tribe, known as the Dake, sought to form a union with the kingdom of Ulbrin to increase trade and commerce. However, Rushar was a country steeped in history and tradition, and determined to preserve its old ways, the Rusharian High Council denied the Dake's proposal, but the Maverick tribe went ahead with the union regardless, leading the country into a violent and bloody civil war. As the war escalated, Ulbrin and other nations were drawn into the conflict, some seeking to end the war peacefully, others seeking profit. Amongst these parties was the corrupt Tycoon Mandrid Stanning, whose arms company, Stanning Conflict Resolution, known as the SCR, began selling weapons to both the Dake and Rusharian forces, making billions in blood money in the process. As the conflict grew, with both sides receiving heavy casualties, the Rusharian government contracted the SCR to create an ultimate weapon for them to finally destroy their enemies for good. The SCR answered their request with the nightmarish warhead, the Hexapocalos. Launched at the Dake capital of Gerod, the city was utterly destroyed in a single moment, and the war was won. But the worst was yet to come. Unbeknownst to the Rusharians, the true nature of the weapon was more powerful than they could possibly have imagined. Created through both the darkest of science and evil sorcery, the fallout from the blast spread across the entire world, carrying with it the ancient plague, the Breath of Hyurk, which had ravaged Rushar in years past. Those who were not killed immediately upon coming into contact with it were transformed into ravening mutants and zombies. The survivors fled the cities into the wilderness, forming into smaller communities fighting together for survival, whilst the most violent, savage criminals banded together into tribes of their own and fought back, retaking control of some of the smaller cities before raiding and pillaging the other survivor communities around them. Gaia-Mor was reduced to a desolate wasteland, ruled by fear, violence, and despair. But all was not lost. Humanity's cry for help was answered by the ancient star gods, benevolent celestial entities born of the universe's light. Turning their attentions to Gaia-Mor, the gods selected their champions from the remnants of humankind, blessing these individuals with superhuman powers and tasking them to each find the other and form the sacred order of CelesSteel, humanity's last hope against the encroaching darkness. The being known as MIERA was once a brilliant professor of computer science and headed the technology development company, Quire, in charge of creating an artificial intelligence program, Justice. As an entirely maths-based, objective judiciary system, Justice was to become the ultimate authority on peacekeeping and government for all of Gaia-Mor, ensuring a legal system which was completely free from any form of subjective bias. Preliminary tests were highly promising, and it appeared that Justice may indeed prove a vital tool in ensuring a lasting peace on Gaia-Mor. However, with the launch of the Hexapocalos, Quire was devastated, and most of its staff killed when the fallout cloud reached Ulbrin. MIERA isolated herself in the facility and continued to work tirelessly on Justice. It had originally been created with the intention of harmonizing humanity, and now humankind needed its counsel more than ever. One night, as MIERA was continuing her relentless efforts to complete the program, it was suddenly attacked by a virus, the likes of which she had never seen before. Effortlessly passing through and disabling Quire's cutting-edge security systems, the virus began ravaging Justice. As MIERA attempted to manually shut down the system and prevent any further damage to the precious program, the virus released an EMP, which drove Quire's systems haywire, triggering an explosion and setting the whole facility ablaze. MIERA found herself trapped as smoke flooded the building and flames crept ever closer. With no other escape options, she took a desperate measure and uploaded her personality into Quire's main server as the blaze consumed the building along with her physical body. Trapped within the program and at the mercy of the virus, Dr. MIERA's cry for help was answered by the star goddess Zubin El Ganubi, who entered the program and took control. The goddess told MIERA that the virus was of a supernatural and demonic origin, an avatar of chaos, an antithesis of the order within justice. Its power was such that even the goddess could not banish it from the system. However, she could provide MIERA with the means to control it. Zubin presented her champion with the Scales of Justice, an ancient artifact capable of manipulating and balancing the very energies of the universe, and also the Sword of Virtue. Finally, with her physical form destroyed, MIERA would need a new body. She was presented with a towering, ethereal-looking replacement, a mechanical statue created in MIERA's own likeness. Combining her own conscience with justice, she became MIERA, the merciful, intelligent, empathetic, resolute android, and would seek out the other members of CelesSteel that she might guide them with her precise and logical counsel in the coming struggle. Hailing from the far eastern land of Sentochi, Kenyokai came into existence centuries before the events of CelesSteel, and once belonged to a legendary samurai by the name of Odakashi. As a boy, Odakashi had grown up in a small farming village, where the villagers were protected by an old samurai named Kenzo, whom Odakashi's father had once saved from grievous wounds suffered in battle. In repayment, Kenzo agreed to train Odakashi in the ways of the sword, and it was during their training together that they would often find themselves being watched by one of the village's goats, as it sat in silent observation for hours on end. That year brought a terrible winter, where many of the farm animals died in the harsh cold, yet this one particular goat survived, and come the spring, went on to become the strongest and most virile in the village. In memory of that goat, upon completing his training and coming of age, Odakashi had the village blacksmith create for him a suit of armour in the goat's likeness, which he would go on to wear throughout his illustrious and legendary career as a warrior, embarking upon many bold adventures, and acquiring the mighty magical blades Furin, the Wind Cutter, and Kazan, Sword of the Burning Mountain. When it came for Odakashi to finally sheathe his blades for the last time, they were placed in the horns of his kabuto, and the armour was laid to rest in his dojo. As the years went by, the empty eyes of its goat mask watched as Odakashi trained countless students. It was never alive, but its eyes were always open, and always watching, just like the young goat many years before. Centuries passed, and the armour found its way through numerous other dojos, palaces, and private antique collections, until eventually finding itself in the Great Museum of Keystone, in the country of Albrin, as part of an international exhibit. It was during this time that the Risharian civil war had reached its peak, and the Hexapocalypse had been launched. As the fallout cloud swept across Albrin, people were transformed into mutants and zombies wherever the virus fell. As the streets swarmed with the undead, the civilians fled from them, seeking refuge in the museum. But the security doors could not hold forever, and the sheer press from the outside eventually forced them inward. Carnage erupted within the museum, the monsters tearing their way through the desperate, panicking refugees. Their plight caught the attention of the star god of Capricorn, Prima Guidi, who, in order to lend his aid, sought a champion among them to bestow his powers upon, but no one had the strength of spirit to receive his blessing. That was when the god detected the residual warrior energy emanating from the ancient suit of armour that had once belonged to Odakashi. Speaking directly to the essence the armour had acquired throughout the centuries, its eyes began to glow with an eerie light. For the first time in its long existence, it knew life and consciousness. Prima Guidi bestowed the name Kenyokai upon it, and the newborn warrior sprang into action, shattering the glass case around it and unsheathing Furin and Kazan from his horns, tearing into the zombie horde in a storm of wind and fire. Within minutes, Kenyokai had single-handedly saved the civilians who had sought refuge in the museum, even as they cowered before him, not knowing what to make of their ghostly saviour. Still confused as to what was going on, Kenyokai asked Prima Guidi what he was and why he had been summoned, to which the star god expressed his gratitude in how well his champion had performed, and told him to seek out CelesSteel and join them in their coming battles against the darkness. Friendly, approachable, patient and understanding. None of these words are appropriate when describing the champion of Scorpio, Zakhadar, more commonly referred to simply as Zach by other members of the Order. Foul-tempered and hostile in nature, Zach is an overwhelmingly intense presence in any situation, his hair-trigger temper causing him to lash out at anyone or indeed anything which provokes him, and so it goes without saying that he is not particularly liked nor trusted by those around him. But he wasn't always this way. Born into the Daiki tribe in Rashar, Zach was originally a journalist and operated as a war correspondent during the Civil War. He bravely chose to report from both sides, showing the fear and suffering each were inflicting upon the other, and desperately tried to help end the conflict as swiftly and peacefully as possible. Thanks to his efforts, and those like him, resistance to the war grew, and gradually it appeared that both sides may even consider peace talks. This was until the terrorist group Shekran became involved in the conflict and began to ravage the Dake, striking at them with one vicious, insane act of horror after another. It was when Zach was reporting from a refugee hospital with his wife, Rhea, that Shekran struck once more. The group released a poison gas attack on the hospital. Zach and Rhea desperately tried to usher the sick and dying away from the fumes, but to no avail, as victims began asphyxiating and falling dead around them even as they attempted to drag them to safety. Eventually, the pair themselves were overwhelmed by the gas. Zach collapsed to the ground as consciousness left him. Against all odds, he survived. As he came to, he was greeted by a vision of horror. The dead were piled all around him where they had fallen in a desperate attempt to escape, terrified, dead eyes of the innocent gazing up at him lifelessly. Zach crawled over to Rhea's body and held her in his arms, letting out a scream of anguish before again falling into unconsciousness. When Zach awoke once more, he found himself tied to an operating table. Dake Special Forces had found him the only survivor of the attack and transferred him to a secret facility where they had discovered that Zach's body had somehow assimilated the poison gas and mutated. Filled with confusion and fury, he demanded to be released immediately, but the medical team refused him without further testing. Zach thrashed in his restraints, breaking his own skin. Both he and the scientist shocked as his now acidic blood ate through the restraints like lava through butter, freeing him. Catching sight of himself in the reflection of a monitor, Zach was horrified by what he had become. Prominent veins beneath his skin glowing with burning green ichor, his once gentle blue eyes now turned into burning red pits of fury, and upon his brow was the mark of the Black Scorpion, an ancient Dake symbol of vengeance. Soon, word began to spread of a terrible demon hunting down and killing members of Shekran, as Zakhadar unleashed his vengeance upon the terrorists. The sheer fury of his assaults brought the terrorist attacks to a complete halt as Shekran fled, believing they had awakened an ancient curse. But Zach would not stop there. He pursued them deep into the depths of the Risharian desert, eventually cornering the organization's leader, Bartosz, in a mountain cave. The pair clashed in a vicious, brutal battle, with Zach eventually taking the upper hand and defeating the madman. These events had scarred Zach's mind and soul deeply. Any semblance of compassion, love or hope in him had been burned to ash. He didn't even care when he saw the Hexapocalos roaring through the sky as he wandered the scorching desert alone, awaiting his fate. Then one night, he saw a star shining in the sky, brighter than any he had ever seen before. Speaking to whatever flicker of light remained in Zakhadar's soul, he followed the star, before the sand gave way beneath him, and he fell. He landed in a long-forgotten shrine, belonging to the darkest and most mysterious of the star gods, Antares. The star god told Zach that he had watched him with great interest, and he had been impressed by his champion's sheer ruthlessness in destroying Shekran, but the true enemy was still out there. Zach wasn't interested. He was dead inside. He had become a monster, with nothing left to fight for. Antares told him that he was wrong, and the salvation he secretly longed for was still possible, but first he must find a way back from the dark path he was travelling. Told that his destiny lay with the CelesSteel, Zakhadar set forth from the desert to find the others. That's it for this video, folks. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the characters. Don't forget to vote for the next 3 you'd like me to cover, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share it. Anything that aids us in getting word out on CelesSteel is a great help to the project. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.